There's a type of prison most people never escape, not because the walls are high or the locks are strong, but because the prisoner doesn't know he's locked inside. He thinks the bars are just how life is. He thinks helplessness is realism. He thinks chronic complaint is just being honest about his struggles. But it's not honesty. It's a victim mindset, and you can hear it in the language. The phrases, the patterns, the way someone talks about their life like it's something happening to them rather than something they're creating with their choices. And here's what makes this dangerous. Victimhood is addictive. It provides comfort. It removes responsibility. It guarantees sympathy, but it also guarantees you'll stay exactly where you are. The Stoics knew that freedom begins in the mind, that you can be imprisoned by circumstances or by perspective, and the latter is far more common. Today, we're examining 7 phrases that reveal a victim mindset, not to judge anyone, but to recognize the pattern, because awareness is the first step toward freedom, and freedom is the only thing worth fighting for. Let's start by understanding what a victim mindset actually is. It's not about being an actual victim. Bad things happen. People get dealt unfair hands. Trauma is real. Injustice exists. Acknowledging that isn't victimhood, it's reality. Victim mindset is something different. It's a learned pattern of interpreting life through the lens of powerlessness. It's the belief that external forces control your destiny, and there's nothing meaningful you can do about it. People with victim mindsets see themselves as perpetually acted upon. Life happens to them. Problems are always someone else's fault. Every setback confirms their story. The world is against them. They never get a fair shot. Nothing they do matters anyway. And here's the part most people miss. There are psychological payoffs to victimhood. Payoff 1. You're never responsible. If everything is someone else's fault, you never have to examine your own role. You never have to change. Payoff 2. You get sympathy. People feel sorry for you. You get attention, comfort, validation for your suffering. Payoff 3. You have built-in excuses. You don't have to try as hard because, after all, what's the point? The system is rigged. You're doomed to fail anyway. These payoffs are why victimhood is so hard to escape. It's not just a mindset, it's a strategy, a maladaptive one, but a strategy nonetheless. Carl Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." Victim mindset reverses that equation. It says, I am only what happened to me. What I choose is irrelevant because I have no real power. That belief, internalized and reinforced through language, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You stop looking for opportunities because you're convinced they don't exist. You stop trying because failure confirms your worldview. You stop growing because growth requires believing change is possible. And the words you use, they're both symptom and cause. They reveal the mindset and reinforce it. That's why this matters. Because language isn't neutral. It programs you. Every time you speak from victimhood, you train your brain to see the world that way. And over time, that perspective becomes your reality, but it doesn't have to be. Awareness breaks the pattern. Once you see the language, you can change it. And when you change the language, the mindset follows. So let's look at the 7 phrases. Not to shame anyone who said them, most of us have at some point, but to recognize them for what they are, indicators that we've slipped into victim mode. 1. Why does this always happen to me? This phrase reveals a core victim belief. I am uniquely cursed. Why do I always get screwed over? Why does everyone else get lucky except me? Why do these things keep happening to me? You're positioning yourself as the universe's personal target, as if there's some cosmic conspiracy ensuring you specifically get the short end of every stick. But here's the reality. Everyone has problems. Everyone faces setbacks. Everyone deals with disappointment, betrayal, bad timing, unfair circumstances. You're not special in your suffering, you're just human. The difference is how you frame it. When things go wrong for someone with an ownership mindset, they ask, what can I learn from this? What was my role? What can I control going forward? When things go wrong for someone with a victim mindset, they ask, why does this always happen to me? It's a rhetorical question that doesn't seek answers. It seeks confirmation of powerlessness. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, betrayal, and the weight of an empire. He didn't ask, why me? He asked, does what's happened keep you from acting with justice, generosity, self-control? In other words, does this obstacle prevent you from being who you're meant to be? No, then it's just information, just terrain to navigate. The phrase, why does this always happen to me, also reveals selective memory. You're cataloging every negative event and ignoring every time things went well. You're filtering reality through a lens that confirms victimhood. The strongman reframes, not, why does this always happen to me, but what am I going to do about this? Not, why do I always get screwed? But, what pattern am I contributing to here? That shift from rhetorical despair to actionable inquiry changes everything. 2. Nobody understands what I'm going through. This is victimhood seeking isolation and uniqueness. You don't know what it's like. Nobody gets it. I'm dealing with things other people couldn't handle. You're building a fortress of suffering that only you inhabit. You're declaring your experience so unique, so profound, that no one else could possibly relate. But that's almost never true. Yes, your specific circumstances are unique, but the human experiences underneath them, pain, loss, fear, betrayal, confusion, are universal. Someone has been where you are. Someone has felt what you feel. Someone has navigated terrain far harder and survived. When you say nobody understands, what you're really saying is, I want to stay isolated in this narrative. I don't want to hear that others have overcome this. I don't want solutions. I want validation for my suffering. That's victimhood protecting itself. Because if someone does understand, if someone has been through similar and come out the other side, then your excuse evaporates. Then you have to face the possibility that you could change your situation too. Epictetus, a slave who became one of history's greatest philosophers, taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. He could have said, nobody understands what I'm going through as a slave. Instead, he chose to focus on what he could control, his mind, his character, his response. The phrase also pushes away help. When you declare that nobody understands, you're rejecting connection, guidance, perspective. You're ensuring you stay stuck because you've disqualified everyone who might help you get unstuck. The strong man acknowledges struggle differently, not nobody understands what I'm going through, but this is hard and I need to figure out how to move through it. Not, you don't know what it's like, but can you help me think through this? He seeks connection, not isolation. Solutions, not sympathy. 3. I never get a break. This is victimhood as a permanent state. I can't catch a break. Just when things start to improve, something else goes wrong. I'm always dealing with something. You're framing your life as an uninterrupted string of misfortune. No rest, no reprieve, just endless problems crashing over you like waves. But that's selective perception, not objective reality. You do get breaks, you just don't register them, because the victim mindset filters for problems and ignores progress. It notices every setback and overlooks every win. It magnifies difficulty and minimizes ease. When something good happens, the victim dismisses it. Yeah, but it won't last. When something bad happens, the victim catalogs it. See, this is my life. I never get a break. Seneca warned against this pattern. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. You're not suffering constantly. You're remembering past suffering and anticipating future suffering while ignoring the present moments of neutrality or even peace. This phrase also reveals a passive stance. I never get a break, as if breaks are dispensed by some external force, as if you're just waiting for fortune to smile rather than creating your own momentum. But breaks aren't given. They're made through preparation, through consistent effort, through refusing to collapse. When things get hard, the strong man sees differently. Not, I never get a break, but I'm working through a challenging period. Not, just when things improve, something else goes wrong. But life includes setbacks. I'm building resilience to handle them. He acknowledges difficulty without catastrophizing. He sees challenges as temporary, not permanent. Chapter 4. Everyone else has it easier. This is victimhood through comparison. Other people don't have to deal with this. They have advantages I'll never have. It's easy for them to say they don't understand struggle. You're looking at everyone else's outsides and comparing them to your insides. You see their curated highlights and assume that's their full reality. You see their success and assume it came easy. But you don't see the 3 a.m. doubt, the failures they recovered from, the sacrifices they made, the years of work that looked like nothing was happening. Everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. The person you think has it easy, they're dealing with things you couldn't imagine. The person whose life looks perfect, it's not. This comparison game is poison because it allows you to abdicate responsibility. Of course, they succeeded. They had advantages, as if advantage guarantees outcomes, as if lack of advantage guarantees failure. But history is full of people who succeeded despite overwhelming disadvantage, and full of people who failed despite every advantage. Because advantage isn't destiny, response is. Marcus Aurelius was born into privilege, yet spent his life serving with difficulty. Epictetus was born a slave, yet became free through philosophy. Circumstance varied, mindset determined outcome. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Marcus Aurelius. When you say, everyone else has it easier, you're declaring that external conditions determine everything, that you're powerless, that your starting point seals your ending point. None of that is true. The strong man acknowledges reality without resentment. Not everyone else has it easier, but everyone has their own challenges. Mine are mine to solve. Not they have advantages I'll never have, but I'm working with what I have, not lamenting what I lack. He compares himself to who he was yesterday, not to others today. 5. If only X, then I could Y. This is victimhood as conditional dreaming. If only I had more money, then I could start. If only people appreciated me, then I'd be happy. If only I'd had better parents, then I wouldn't struggle. If only external condition, then I could desired outcome. You're tying your potential to circumstances outside your control. You're saying, I could be great, but the world won't let me. But that's a lie you tell yourself to avoid the discomfort of trying, because here's the truth. If only is a delay tactic. It's a way to preserve your self-image while avoiding the risk of failure. You get to imagine yourself as someone who could achieve great things. If only circumstances were different. You never have to test that belief. You never have to confront the possibility that even with ideal circumstances, you might still struggle. If only is victimhood's safety net. Epictetus taught, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In other words, work with what you have. Now, not when conditions improve, not when you feel ready, not when the stars align. Every successful person started without everything they needed. They improvised. They began with scraps and built upward. They didn't wait for if only to resolve. The strong man acts in spite of conditions, not if only I had more money, then I could start. But I'm starting with what I have and figuring out the rest. Not, if only people appreciated me, then I'd be happy. But my worth isn't determined by external validation. Not, if only I'd had better circumstances, but I'm making the most of where I am right now. He understands that conditions will never be perfect, that waiting for if only is waiting forever. 6. I'm just unlucky. This is victimhood as fate. I have bad luck. Some people are lucky, I'm not. Nothing ever works out for me. You're attributing outcomes to a mystical force, luck, rather than to choices, effort, preparation, and response. Now, yes, randomness exists. Timing matters. Some people do encounter more favorable circumstances than others. But luck, as a determinant of life outcomes, that's victim thinking disguised as realism. Because when you believe you're unlucky, you stop looking for what you can control. You stop analyzing what went wrong. You stop adapting. Why bother? You're unlucky. The dice are loaded against you. But Seneca saw through this centuries ago. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. What you call luck is often the result of positioning, of being ready when the moment arrives, of having built skills, relationships, knowledge over years of quiet work. The lucky person who gets the job, they spent years building expertise, so when the opportunity arose, they were qualified. The lucky person who found a great relationship, they worked on themselves so they could recognize and attract quality. The lucky person whose business took off, they tried 10 times before. The 11th worked. You only saw the 11th. When you say, I'm just unlucky, you're erasing all the choices, habits, and patterns that contributed to outcomes. You're absolving yourself of responsibility and guaranteeing you'll repeat the same patterns. The strong man understands probability differently. Not, I'm just unlucky. But I need to change my approach. Not, some people are lucky. But some people position themselves better. Not, nothing ever works out. But I haven't found what works. Yet, he sees outcomes as feedback, not fate. 7. What's the point? Nothing ever works out anyway. This is victimhood as learned helplessness. Why even try? It won't matter. Nothing I do changes anything. You've internalized defeat so deeply that you've stopped trying. You've trained yourself to see effort as futile. This is the final stage of victimhood, total surrender. And it's dangerous, because once you believe nothing you do matters, you stop doing anything meaningful. You drift, you numb, you exist in a state of passive resignation, waiting for life to happen to you because you've convinced yourself you can't happen to it. But that belief isn't truth, it's trauma. It's the result of trying things that didn't work and concluding that nothing will work. It's extrapolating failure into identity. Viktor Frankl, who survived concentration camps, wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Even in the most extreme conditions imaginable, he found the point, not in controlling outcomes, but in controlling response, not in guaranteed success, but in maintaining dignity, purpose, and meaning regardless of external conditions. When you say, "What's the point?" you're declaring that meaning only exists if you get what you want. That effort only matters if it produces visible results. That your actions have no value unless they change your circumstances. But that's not how meaning works. The point isn't always outcome. Sometimes the point is character, integrity, the person you become through persistent effort, even when results are slow. The point isn't guaranteed success. It's refusing to let circumstances dictate your spirit. The strong man finds purpose in process, not what's the point, but the point is who I become through trying. Not nothing ever works out, but some things work, some don't. I keep moving, not it won't matter, but it matters because I say it does. He creates meaning. He doesn't wait for it to be delivered. Look at those 7 phrases together. Why does this always happen to me? Nobody understands what I'm going through. I never get a break. Everyone else has it easier. If only X, then I could be. I'm just unlucky. What's the point? Nothing ever works out anyway. Each one is a door closing, a possibility dismissed, a path rejected before it's even explored. Taken together, they form a complete victim narrative. The world is against me. Nobody understands. I never catch a break. Others have it easier. If circumstances were different, I could succeed. But they're not different. I'm unlucky. So what's the point? That story, repeated enough times, becomes your reality, not because it's true, but because belief shapes behavior, and behavior creates outcomes. When you believe you're a victim, you act like one. You don't prepare because what's the point? You don't try hard because you'll fail anyway. You don't learn from mistakes because they're not your fault. You don't adapt because circumstances are the problem, not your approach. And then, predictably, things don't improve, which confirms the story, which reinforces the language, which deepens the pattern. It's a closed loop, a prison of your own construction. But here's what the Stoics understood. You're not trapped by circumstances. You're trapped by interpretation. The same event can be framed as another thing going wrong, or as another opportunity to build resilience. The same challenge can be proof I'm unlucky, or evidence I need a different strategy. The same setback can be why does this always happen to me, or interesting. What can I learn here? The facts are the same, the language is different, and the language determines the response, and the response determines the outcome. That's why this matters. That's why examining these 7 phrases isn't about judgment. It's about liberation, because once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Once you recognize victim language, you can choose different words. And when you choose different words, you access different thoughts. And different thoughts create different actions, and different actions create different results. This doesn't mean you ignore injustice. It doesn't mean you pretend hard things aren't hard. It doesn't mean you gaslight yourself into toxic positivity. It means you separate what happened from what it means. It means you acknowledge difficulty without letting it define you. It means you face reality as it is while refusing to surrender your agency. Aristotle said, "It is during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light." The light isn't always a solution. Sometimes it's just a choice. The choice to respond with intention rather than reaction. The choice to take one small step rather than collapse in despair. The choice to ask, what now, instead of why me? That choice, made consistently, is how you escape victimhood. Not overnight, not through some dramatic transformation, through small shifts in language that create small shifts in perspective, that create small shifts in action. And small shifts, compounded over time, change everything. Here's your practice for the next week. Catch yourself using victim language, any of the 7 phrases or variations of them. The moment you hear yourself say it, pause. Don't judge. Don't shame yourself. Just notice, then reframe it, out loud if possible. If you just said, "Why does this always happen to me?" say instead, "What can I do about this?" If you caught yourself thinking, "Nobody understands," say instead, "I'm going to work through this." If "what's the point" is rising up, say instead, "The point is who I'm becoming." One reframe at a time, one conscious choice to speak from agency instead of victimhood, and then notice what shifts. Not in your circumstances, those might take longer to change, but in how you feel about your circumstances, in your sense of power, in your willingness to try. Because that shift, from victim to owner, from passenger to driver, from life happens to me to I happen to life, that's freedom. That's what the Stoics lived for. That's what they taught. That's what's available to you the moment you choose different words. Your move. Stay focused. Stay grounded. And remember, the quiet work you do today is shaping the strength they'll never see coming.